company is Workflow Intelligence Nexus. For anyone who's not familiar with us, Workflow Intelligence Nexus has been around for the better part of about, at this point, 12 years, 13 years. We've worked with just about every major media asset management system out there. We've worked with a lot of different media companies. And today what we're going to be talking about is auto-scale transcoding with the AWS Media Convert plugin that we have created for Iconic. Let me get back in here. There we go. So a little bit about myself. Again, as I mentioned, I've been working in this space for a long time. Prior to working in the space of media asset management, I actually used to produce independent content, worked as a producer, editor, visual effects coordinator. So basically, I felt all of the pain points around working with content, creating content, and trying to move that content around the world in efficient and effective ways. And especially back when I was doing it, it was incredibly painful and in need of a lot of help, which is what my motivation was to get into this space in the first place, was to be able to find and build solutions to make these things all work better in general. And so one of the big things that, well, some of the things that we're going to talk about, I'm going to go through, I'll show you a quick glossary of terms for anyone who's not familiar. Part of the reason why that's in here is we can actually make this deck available. So if anyone is interested, please let us know afterward. We'll also post this up somewhere on the website. And we're going to talk about the problem, the benefits of autoscale transcoding, what exactly this plugin is, a comparison with the Iconic edge nodes, talk a little bit about when it makes sense to use just edge nodes versus where this tool makes sense, and how to get started. So first off, I'm not going to spend too much time. This is really more about being able to pass this section on to other people in the organization afterward. But this is just a definition of some of the terms here of what we're going to be talking about. So feel free to check that out later looking at the deck. So what's the problem that we're trying to solve here? Well, the problem is the cost for companies to be able to ingest really large quantities of media files very rapidly into Iconic. If you try to do this with just straight out of the box solutions, what we have is in Iconic, first off, you have the cloud transcoder that you get out of the box, which is great and incredible value for being able to have something that just comes with the system. Supports a tremendous wide variety of formats, and you can normally get somewhere between about 10 to 15 simultaneous transcodes on it, which is actually really good bandwidth, depending on how busy the system is. The challenge with that is with standard transcode options, that maximum capacity is also based on a monthly fee per transcode node when you shift away from doing the out of the box stuff to starting to use an edge node transcoder. So where the edge node transcoders work really well is you just want to be able to have security and you want to have control over your transcode. And so you want to spin up these edge node transcoders so you can also control the performance of them by deciding how beefy they are. And that can give you, 10, maybe even 20 slots of transcode at a pretty good performance at still a reasonable cost. Now, theoretically, you can keep scaling that up as much as you want, but the one challenge that we see a lot of customers have had with that is that our content ingest demands are not always consistent across the board. So if I'm just coming into Iconic and I'm just starting out, I might have nothing in Iconic and I might have a backlog of, a couple 100,000 or 1 million plus files I need to get ingested. Whereas on a regular basis, I might only be ingesting another 50 to 100 files a week. So that initial push to get all that first content ingested isn't going to match up with my ongoing needs for things like edge transcoders. So the solution that we came up with was to be able to create a dynamic, automatically scaling tool that can simultaneously upload hundreds or even thousands of files all at once and be able to run this on demand, where it literally costs you nothing as far as the actual backend services are concerned. And it would only cost you basically our subscription fee at that point until you start running it. And then once you start running it, you're literally paying just for the content processed. So who can benefit from this? the people that we've seen benefit from this primarily tend to come across in these three groups so far, but there's many other people who can benefit. At a high level, it's for anyone who has large amounts of content that they would need to get ingested as quickly as possible. Now, some people might have that one time for 1 month, and that's great. You can actually turn on this service for 1 month, access it, process all the content you need, and turn it off. Other people have a constant ongoing need where they're constantly generating large amounts of content. And for those people, you can sign up for an ongoing monthly subscription, a quarterly based subscription, or an annual based subscription. So these groups that we tend to see are people like media agencies, where we can help accelerate project turnaround from days to hours and be able to help them have more agile responses and be able to just deliver that content faster. OTT media providers, where they go out and we have customers who are going out and acquiring or purchasing complete seasons of television shows. And then as soon as they make that acquisition, they need to get it ingested as quickly as possible, encoded as quickly as possible, so they can start pushing it out to their different distribution channels. Being able to encode those massive libraries very quickly, this brings a ton of value. And then live event producers, being able to transcode tons of footage in, again, as close to real time as possible, gives you the ability to create things like highlight reels and be able to dive into that content very quickly after it's shot, where we have one customer that's in the video game space, and they leverage this more than anyone else, where after a big event that they'll have, they might generate literally 700, 800 hours of content that they need to get ingested. And again, traditional means would take a long time, but with this tool, we could get that content ingested literally in less than an hour, or maybe just over 1 to 2 hours at the most. So that's kind of who can benefit. So what is it? Well, the AWS Media Convert plugin is a subscription tool that is designed to intelligently scale your AWS resources as needed to be able to maximize the transcoding speed within Iconic and save money through the process. When we talk about scaling AWS resources, we're not talking about creating a bunch of EC2 instances, building them and tearing them down. No, everything is serverless based and just using AWS services. So it's using AWS Media Convert very heavily as the primary utility that we're working with. But it's a lot of things we're doing about how we're scaling it and how we're being able to feed that content into it. When we talk about rapid processing, we are literally seeing that we can be capable of running hundreds to potentially thousands of transcode jobs simultaneously. The last time we specifically did a test on this with one of our customers who's doing the most content through it right now, I think they were pushing about 750 simultaneous transcodes when they were doing an ingest. And the only reason why they believe they never got to hitting 1,000, the maximum on their account in AWS, was purely because when they were doing 750 simultaneous, the jobs would finish faster than new jobs could get into the queue. So they were actually hitting a limit of going faster than they were capable of putting content into the bucket before they would hit a limit of the 1,000 transcode jobs they could do simultaneously. And then the other big thing about this utility, as we mentioned a little bit before, is that it's scalable on-demand pricing. So the transcoding process is completely independent of Iconic. So there's no need for actual Iconic edge transcoders. This is in some ways an alternative, but in some ways it's also supplemental, because oftentimes we might have someone who has 1 or 2 Iconic edge transcoders that service their regular daily needs pretty well, but then they have an event that happens once a quarter, or they have an event that happens, once a year even. And for that event, those 2 edge node transcoders they have just might not cut it. Or if they only have 1 edge node transcoder, it's really not going to cut it. And they need something much faster that they can implement quickly, get all the content in, and then come out without having to make any long-term commitments or spend extra cash being able to do. So what's the pricing breakdown and how exactly does it compare to the edge nodes? So when we look at the iconic edge nodes, basically you have two top level costs. You have the edge node cost versus our plugin. So the edge node starts at $400 a month per node, and then our plugin is $1,197. Now the difference here is we don't have nodes. So that $1,197 gives you full access to go as fast as you can possibly go and transcode as many simultaneous files as you can. Then for comparison, what we like to look at is the two different edge nodes that we get deployed for our customers most frequently tend to be on the AWS, and they tend to be utilizing things like a C4 4x large or a C4 8x large. In our experience, the 4x large is pretty good for being able to get about 4 simultaneous jobs running HD material, and the 8x large is pretty good for doing about 10 simultaneous jobs. And so when you look at the total monthly cost, if you're only doing 4 jobs at once, and that's going to be able to get you through, which works for a lot of people, that you basically come out to around $1,440 a month, covering your iconic cost and the AWS cost, and that's pretty good. However, your performance, if you're going to bring in something like 1,000 1-hour-long files, this is where we want to see the difference and the reason why the Media Convert plugin comes into play. 125 hours being processed through the edge nodes, in our experience, can take approximately 5 days. The reason why, the 1,000 hours can take approximately 125 hours to process. The reason why it takes so long is because of only running the amount of jobs at once you can run through that node.